The president, the executive branch. This is the one branch that most of you watching this were probably the most familiar with before you even took this class. And just like in the Congress video, there are some things I want you to think about as you're learning about what powers the president actually has. And that is, what kind of president do you want? Do you want one that just strictly follows the rules and never breaks them? Or do you want a president who's really good at figuring out where the loopholes are? Now, nobody wants a president to violate the law. Most of us will agree that's a bad thing. But we all know that sometimes you can kind of get around a rule without breaking it. Well, what does it mean when a president does that? Is that an example of the Leviathan getting out of control? Or do sometimes the ends justify the means? Again, there's no right answers. It's just yet another question that over the course of your life, you're going to have to figure out for yourself. So the president has 5 roles that he has to play as president, as leader of the executive branch. The first of those roles is chief of state. He is the chief of state when he hosts foreign leaders who visit the U.S. And he's also chief of state when he travels outside of the U.S. and meets with foreign leaders abroad. His role is one of diplomacy, which is the art of negotiating peacefully with foreign governments to try to avoid war. Not only avoid war between America and other countries, but to try to mediate between 2 countries that are about to go to war, like Israel and Palestine, which is a conflict that is constantly at the edge of breaking out into a war. Another role the president has is that of chief executive, which is law enforcement. The Constitution is very clear that while Congress passes laws, only the president has the power to enforce them. So yes, it is true that Congress can take his budget away. The president can also choose to say, well, you can pass that law, but I'm not going to make anybody follow it. And if he doesn't make anybody follow it, then that law pretty much loses its power. So that's chief executive. He has the power to enforce laws by creating many agencies like the FBI, the CIA, ATF, immigration, and many more agencies that have been developed to try to enforce federal law as Congress has passed it, which really means that his role as chief administrator goes hand in hand with chief executive. So as chief executive, he's in charge of enforcing the law. As chief administrator, he's also in charge of organizing and managing all these massive agencies that are enforcing law and creating new regulations across the country. By far the most powerful role that the president has is commander-in-chief, and that's military leader, because there's not much of a check on this power. Congress has a little bit of a check. They do require that if a war goes on for 60 days, that he has to ask Congress for approval. But most Congresses wouldn't say no, and there's been many times when the president didn't ask approval and Congress was just kind of cool with it. So, military leader, the president really can do everything he says he can do. If you have a president or someone who's running for president saying, as president, this is what I'm going to do against this country or that country, he probably can, because there's not much to say he can't. Even the Supreme Court has very little to say that can limit the president's power to use the military against other countries or to have relationships, positive and negative, with other countries. The final role that the president has is that of chief agenda setter, in which he sets the goals for the federal government and Congress, including the federal budget. Now, Congress doesn't have to accept his budget, and they're not required to even listen to his agenda, but generally they at least start with it as a foundation, as a starting point, and then they take it and make it in the way that they think it should be. Sometimes if Congress is getting along well with the president, they'll pretty much take his agenda, his budget plan as it is. And sometimes if they really, really don't like the president, they'll take it, throw it in the trash can, and then stick with the agenda that they actually want to do. Now, at this point, I hope you're getting the idea that the presidency is a really big job with a lot of moving pieces. The executive branch is such a huge branch. It is the largest branch. Congress has like 500 something senators, and then all the people that they use to help them do their research. The Supreme Court has 9 members, and they all have like a team of like maybe 3 or 4 aides, whereas the executive branch is the president and every national agency in the entire country. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, so it is massive. So to be able to manage all these people and all these moving parts and jobs, the president appoints people to what's known as the cabinet. And the cabinet is an organization made up of the heads of all these different executive departments. And they are responsible for managing different parts of the government, reporting back to the president, and then whatever decisions the president wants to make for those agencies, for those departments, they then take those orders and figure out how to make them work back within the agency. So getting into the president's cabinet is a very powerful position because you are going to have a lot of one-on-one FaceTime about the direction of the country on a daily, weekly basis. Another very powerful organization within the executive branch is the National Security Council, whose main purpose is to bring together the top military, foreign affairs, intelligence officials in the administration to coordinate the U.S. national security policy. So the president's there, the vice president's there, the Secretary of State is there, the leaders of all 4 branches of the military are part of this council, and they meet on a regular basis to decide what we are going to do in regard to threats. So the hunt for bin Laden, investigating WMDs, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, issues related to ISIS, what should we do, what should we not do? This is all policy. These are all plans that are formed by the National Security Council, which of course is led by the president. And that's all there is to know for right now about the executive branch. If you have any questions about the power of the president in class, please let me know. Thank you.